We'll call the meeting to order, and we'll do a roll call vote. Linda Miller.
Here.
Aaron Cusker.
Here.
Dan Gainsborough.
Here.
Scott Bates.
Here.
Peter Lowett is present as well, and we're missing Emily. And we have Elizabeth Hughes and Shannon McAndrew here from as staff. So we don't have minutes in the package. We do need to appoint a rotating clerk for the day to take minutes. Remember, this is being recorded, and we'll just have the opportunity to review a draft. Someone want to volunteer?
I can do it.
Thank you, Aaron. That's much appreciated. All right, next on the agenda is debrief the advisory board meeting and action items for subcommittees. Can we let Erin share her screen if you've got your draft amendment for the subcommittee charter? It's succinct the way I know Linda likes things to be, and very clear. So if you could share that, I think. And
give me 1 second.
Sure.
Can you see that?
Yes.
Is it possible to make it a little bigger?
Yes.
Yeah, you just pinch if you've got an Apple product.
Is that better?
Yes, it is on mine. Dan, is it better on yours?
Yes, thank you.
All right. So if anyone wants to take a moment to take a look at this. And if you've got any comments, I think the only comment I have after looking at this much more succinct approach from our original draft is that it sort of melds with one of the other items on our agenda, which is adding visioning to the objective.
Yeah, I can take a stab at including that as well.
Okay, that would be. So what I'd like is other folks' comments on this.
Well, the visioning piece sort of dovetails into number one, I think, a little bit, because we're,
yes,
it's instead of reviewing, we are developing, hopefully, but.
Yeah, this was written a bit before our last advisory board meeting, so we can try to be a bit stronger about, assuming we all agree that we should be authoring some of those documents. I can try to make that a little bit stronger.
Great. Linda, you usually have incisive comments. Any initial response?
I think this gets back to something I've been trying to work my head around for a while, and that is that as you put in the objective, that the result is recommendations for zoning and mapping or parcel delineation. And that's true, but it seems to me there are a lot of considerations for the site that aren't specifically going to be able to be handled by zoning. Some of this climate resilience goals cannot be zoned for. Some of the, I'm particularly befuddled right now by DCAM's third objective, they talk about housing sustainability and then inclusion of marginalized groups. And I certainly don't know what that means, and I don't know how you zone for it. So there are a lot of issues that are not going to be able to be zoned for. And it seems to me if we don't build them into our objectives and we don't build them into our thinking at the outset, then we end up with zoning code. We turn that over to DCAM and any other ambitions that the town might have for the site are then somehow between DCAM and the developer, and there's not room for the town there. So that is my fundamental conundrum I cannot get around. And so that's
I
Would,
guess,
so design guidelines, yeah, maybe that helps address
about
it.
land use controls? So it could be deed restrictions or other mechanisms that we aren't aware of at this point in our journey that could be used to clarify, limit, what have you, the potential uses and the way they look and such on the site.
I'm not a big fan of trying to put deed restrictions in. It's kind of like, be careful what you wish for there,
Yeah,
or unintended consequences of deed restrictions. So to me, I wouldn't be thinking in that direction. I'm thinking more of, again, when DCAM takes this and goes to the development community, how are they going to incent them to do the geothermal or to provide greater opportunities for those with disabilities or whatever? How do we get into that part of the conversation and make sure we're not ignoring it now? So
I agree with you, Linda. I think the most important part is that we have a say in reviewing and editing that RFP that goes out to developers and to make sure it's incorporated in that. And that's key criteria for picking a developer, and they have to include it in their proposal and have to do. So I don't know if anybody else agrees with that.
I think what my reaction to your comments, Linda, is that I feel like we need to get a little more clear about what it is that those goals mean and what success would look like. I think they're wonderful aspirational ideas and important ideas. The question is, when do you know you got there, for me? And so, because I think there's a whole bunch of mechanisms that potentially could be incorporated into it, whether it's at the RFP level or in the zoning, that probably could get us pretty much all the way there. So that's what I'm sort of focused on, or
yeah, I think that's a really great point, Dan. So maybe in terms of language, we look for, parcel design guidelines, zoning, and other land use mechanisms and controls.
Yeah, Peter probably won't do this, so I'll do it. We, in our response to the RFP that Devon's put out for the housing, they did a great job of being very clear about what it was that they were looking for. And as a developer that had to respond to that, we knew what our marching orders were. So, and in addition to that, they had the innovative residential design guidelines, which are also pretty clear about energy performance and density and diversity of housing types and So
Yeah.
it was, in my experience, was pretty effective. I didn't look at the other 11 respondees. Maybe Peter can speak to that, but we certainly knew what we had to do in order to be considered and considered favorably.
I wanted to add, so other municipalities where I've worked, some districts or some portions of a town will have an overlay code, which is a part of zoning. And it becomes, very, Elizabeth can speak to this. I don't know that there are any in Concord, but there are obviously requirements for certain design elements. And I think there can be requirements for percentages of renewables or things like that that might be part of it. I will also say, because Concord is part of the specialized energy code that's been adopted, there will be very restrictive building codes in place already on any construction that happens.
Thank you.
All right, so are we willing to let Aaron take another cut at revising this to add in visioning and then recirculate it to us?
Yeah, I can do a little wordsmithing and send it out.
Yeah, I'll be, this is going to come up, I think, later in the agenda, but, and you certainly will hear about it next Monday when we meet as a whole group, but it's very clear that the select board and now DCAM all are on board with the idea that this group is going to lead the visioning, master planning effort. And so maybe the language in here is, yeah, that helps, but and just the how we make sure that we've included all the different pieces of that is going to be important. That particular piece, the visioning, and including the visual preferences and helping support the community engagement piece so that we can feel confident that the public understands what these things that we're all talking about actually look like or could look like.
Yeah, one of my primary goals of this was to not overlap with what I'm also doing on the community outreach subcommittee. So, we'll have plenty of work to do, and let's let our partners in the community outreach group help us with getting the input we need.
That makes sense.
That's great. And again, thank you for acting as a liaison with the visioning with the community engagement piece and group. All right. Thank you again, Aaron. So one of the things we got was a preliminary timeline. Was that given to folks?
I believe it was Peter. I believe it was shared with all of the chairs.
Okay.
With the so I can certainly, if you don't have access to it, I can bring it up if that would be
Yeah,
helpful.
if you wouldn't mind.
All right, I gotta figure out how to do that.
The basic thrust of it is the community engagement is the fall, and the visioning starts with the beginning of the new year. Once we have a consultant on board, if I'm summarizing that correctly.
Hang on one second.
Yeah. Actually, the visioning master planning starts in April of 2025 and wraps up in September. Or
All right.
Can you all see my screen?
yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think
Thank
I
you.
have it.
Beat me
No
to it.
problem. Make it bigger. Is that better at all?
It is. It's great.
Okay.
The only problem is now I can't scroll, of course, but anyway. So just quick explanation, and I'll give it back to Peter. It's I took a pass at this just to try to begin to give ourselves some understand how these various pieces fit together. And the expectation was that it would be a working document. The expectation was that it would be shared with the different committees and they would expand in each one of their focus concentration areas. And we would add detail as we saw fit. I have shared this, as I mentioned, with all the chairs. I have shared this with town staff, at least Megan and I believe Elizabeth, but she can tell me yes or no. And then also DCAM. And so, and I tried to, DCAM doesn't have a particularly, you may recall, they shared that timeline at the September 12th meeting. Didn't have a lot of detail on it, but to the degree that there was information in there, I've incorporated that. I also looked at Scott's document that he put together on the consultant hiring, just to begin to think about those kind of things. So it's a Microsoft project. It has, task durations, start, stop dates, finish dates, and then it has predecessors, and then the resource name is at least this moment who I think would be handling it, and hopefully those abbreviations make sense to people. If not, I can explain them. I think that's all I have to say. Happy to
put a lot of work into it. It's appreciated, Dan.
All right, maybe
So basically community engagement now until this next spring, visioning and concept plan development in the spring and into the early summer, and then zoning coming out of that.
how does that align with the financial pressures that we may be under?
Yeah, good question.
That's an excellent question, Aaron. And one of the things that came out of the most recent DCAM coordination meeting was, and we're going to hear about this on Monday from Mary firsthand. She's particularly concerned, as she should be, about they're looking for a budget from all of the subcommittees on how the dollars, and Megan's in that meeting, so she knows about this, how those dollars are going to be spent by the end of June. So that is a big part of what we have to reconcile. And in conversations with Patrick yesterday, not to add any pressure and unnecessary pressure to our lives, but I think getting a draft of the RFP for visioning, master planning, however, whatever, a land use planning firm, if that's the direction we decide we want to go in, that's having an RFP that we could put out on the street before sometime in early November would be very good, and maybe sooner, because we do have DCAM's draft that they did that we can build on, and it certainly doesn't make sense to me that we want to try to reinvent the wheel. It's actually a pretty good document, which they've shared with us, and we can circulate it if it hasn't already been circulated.
I believe it was circulated along with the draft of the zoning scope. And I think, that's a great idea, Dan, sort of trying to meld those two together. So we take the visioning component and put it into the zoning scope of work. Scott?
Questioning about the timing of the zoning RFP and the zoning consultant with the visioning consultant, does it typically go, do they typically parallel each other, or do you bring the zoning consultant on a little bit after the visionary and consultant, let them get some work done before you start tasking the zoning consultant? Just, I'm Not my world.
Yeah, I was thinking it would probably be the same firm, a firm that's large enough, planning, land use firm, you know, RKG, a UTIL, a VHB, there's a whole bunch of them that we could, that would be very responsive to an RFP.
So it's not like you're thinking like a VHB UTL versus like I'm just thinking like Sasaki or Elkis. You're not thinking architect. You're thinking a more land use planner engineer types of consult. I'm just curious.
So Sasaki, does the land use planning and concept planning, as well as developing the zoning and those type of things too. So I would put them in the same category.
Okay.
I think, Scott, it's a great, if I may, Peter, I think it's a great and an important question. I don't know that there's necessarily a right way, or we could probably argue back and forth the merits of both. I think getting them on board early, as Elizabeth has suggested, I think is certainly, I can't see any real harm in that. Maybe someone else has a reason why it's not a good idea, but it's also possible that we pick a land use firm and then they subcontract a number of the different pieces, right? Whether it's the economic analysis or zoning, or there's a whole host of things that we're probably they're going to have to backfill.
And I've got Aaron with a hand up and Linda as well. Aaron, you want to go first?
Yeah, maybe I need to catch up or take a step back, but so going into the last advisory board meeting, there seemed to be a certain amount of sentiment that DCAM wanted to hire this visioning consultant, that was their charge, and the advisory board felt whatever ways about that, but that was sort of the approach. And I think there was concern that, the advisory board and this group wanted to have more input and authorship in that. And that was certainly echoed by Representative Cataldo. And then it was sort of left that this group would go talk about that, and maybe some conversations have had since then. But assuming we move forward with this hiring, and the visioning consultant essentially is hired by the town, is DCAM going to relinquish that piece of it? Or are they going to go do the same thing, and we have two groups basically working in parallel? I don't know.
Can I take a pass at that?
Yeah,
Explaining it, because first of all, completely understandable that you would be confused or at least, scratching your head. And so there was a change. There was a marked change. Quite honestly, Aaron, I was expecting to go into the coordination meeting and have a little bit of a debate and a discussion and debate about it. That Mary was there, and she started the conversation, and in no uncertain terms, she made it clear that because she had heard that we want to lead it, and because of how strongly Simon came out, that it's going to be our game. And so to your point, which is a really important point to bring up, DCAM, so in that meeting was Paul and Abby, and they both said, this is fine, and we will not be duplicating your efforts. We want a seat at the table. We have concerns, as I tried to articulate in the last meeting, that Paul had shared with it, but they are very supportive of us, and part of their willingness to share the RFP, I think, is in the spirit of that. So that, why start all over again? Because, and it is I think it's a good document, good start anyway. I can't speak for other concerns that folks might have, but so does that help? Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Linda?
That answers my questions. Thank you.
Okay. And so can I just say, oh, sorry, Linda, can I just,
No,
this is part of my frustration, and I haven't quite figured out how to deal with this. And it's not a bad thing. I don't think anyone's trying to do anything badly. It's just this information changes literally every day. And I come into it every couple of weeks now with DCAM. And so they've had 2 weeks worth of time to, right? And so I don't know how to do this other than just keep on doing what we're doing and try to stay a step, or at least in step.
Linda, and thank you for keeping on, Dan.
Yes, thank you. For someone who is not well versed in the world of consultants, is there would we be addressing a different project or task if we were dealing with some of the I don't know, engineering firms versus the architectural firms, or can we not write that we have the same needs for both and then make some judgments once we get feedback from them as to who could best satisfy our requirements? I'm wondering, are we putting the cart before the horse here, trying to parse it before we have some sort of, can't they both, aren't they overlapping in some ways, or can't we find someone big enough to have all of those skills that we need?
There are many multidisciplinary firms out there who could provide the range of services that we're talking about, from community engagement to engineering analysis to the land use and visioning component. And they can put together teams of companies to address the specific components that we're looking at as well. It may not all be in one house, but they could subcontract and cover the bases that the town would like to see covered in this process.
So then we don't need to make that consideration, or we don't need to have the discussion now about which firms, because we can, I presume, send out our requests to all of them and see which response we find most compelling. Is that right?
That would be my take on it. And Dan has his hand up and Erin has her hand up again. Dan?
Yeah, but just want to respond specifically to Linda. I would encourage us, just a thought, to try to invite both, if we're oversimplifying this and saying, sort of thinking of it in terms of an architectural-led effort, land planning group, as opposed to a more site planning infrastructure group. I think it would be really good for us to have send out whatever the number is, some reasonable number that we can manage, but people that have slightly different emphasis, and let us see how that manifests itself in their response. And I think that will help inform us as a group as to, well, we want more of this and less of that. Just that's how historically I've dealt with that.
Thanks.
Erin?
Yeah, I would just say, I think we write the scope of work that we want, similar to what Dan was saying, and we describe what we need, and we leave it to the consultants to assemble their team and develop the responses that we think, and through the interview process, we can suss out, if that feels complete. Okay,
and now Elizabeth has her hand up. Elizabeth?
I was just going to say exactly what Erin just said. It's not up to you to figure out what type of consultant you have to send this to. So write the scope. I have in my mind the type of consultant you're going to be doing, visioning scenarios that can lead up to consensus, that can lead up to development of zoning, that can lead up to town meeting. I do not feel you have the time to parcel this out and try and figure this out. So write up a scope of what you want. You're going to be going off the state contract list of planners. You can through the town and combines buys, we can send it off to everybody on that list, and then it's up to them to develop something that is a good response. It's just right now it's really this committee focusing on you know, what is that scope? And you do not need to get so far into the weeds in trying to develop a scope. That's what the interview process is for. That's what their submittal is. You review their submission, you do the interview process, and then, you know, it's the most responsive candidate. And so, yes, I agree with it, Aaron, completely.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Any questions on that end? Okay, so,
Scott's hand is up.
pardon,
Scott's hand is up.
Scott?
Sorry, Elizabeth, I 100% agree with your statement. I'm just curious who from Concord takes our notes and our edits to this RFP that DCAM's providing us and sends it out. What's the protocol and the process for writing the RFP from Concord standpoint and administrating it and setting up the interviews, setting up the tours, all the things that go into it? I don't know that process for Concord.
Dan has a response, Dan?
I do. So that was the discussion that also took place in our last DCAM meeting, and Megan is in the process of trying to arrange a meeting where we will have a discussion about the procurement and contracting protocols. And I think we're going to try to do that sometime this week, but that's a huge part, Scott.
Can we get a copy of the RFP or the committee or no?
That's fine by me. I think Peter has a copy of it, right?
Yeah, I'll send it around after that with the draft scope for the zoning. And then our homework will be to try and look at the DCAM concept plan visioning component and try and integrate it into the zoning scope of work so that you know, it makes we have something to work off of for our next meeting.
Scott, I think you should have it. I think Patrick sent it around yesterday.
Great. Yeah, so if I just want to make sure everyone on the subcommittee has that, and we can.
I only have two. I have the project management one and the request for quotes for proposed zoning, but nothing about the visioning.
So
I think the project management is.
the
Sorry.
project management is the DCAM concept plan RFP.
Yeah, planning and
Project
engagement.
managers is one of the scope items, Scott.
Oh, okay, I got it.
Okay, so again, for us, try and integrate what we feel is the appropriate items from the DCAM scope into the zoning scope that Elizabeth so kindly took a draft of, and make sure that when we meet again to discuss this, we've got scope that integrates developing the concept plan and visioning with the other components of zoning and communication and engagement. One question for Elizabeth and or Megan is the communications and engagement committee looking to have a separate firm working with them, or is it going to be part of the visioning zoning? Is it going to be one, or is that can be broken out?
I can try to speak to that. I think we have talked about trying to just get some administrative communications help for the outreach committee. We have not spoken about a bigger, I mean, we touched on it, but I think would be informed by this decision if we went with a firm that provided all of those services. We were simply looking for someone to help with some upcoming presentations that are quite prescient, and trying to make sure that we have some administrative help for those pieces. But I think it would be small scale compared to this.
Okay, so when you're taking a look, Aaron, could you ask the engagement committee to take a look at the draft scope and make sure that engagement components are in the scope that we're putting together? The zoning scope, make sure that that is expanded to include the engagement pieces outside of this short-term help.
Sure. Our meeting is Friday, so I will discuss it.
That's great. Thank you. All right. Other questions on this? Because otherwise I'd like to jump to what we are going to recommend to the full committee on Monday. I took a cut at it. It's in the agenda, and having heard Scott and Patrick's summary of the meeting with DCAM, I think our recommendation is to have the town implement the visioning process. The town will hire consultant S to facilitate community engagement, prepare a concept plan for the site, generate and analyze land use scenarios and their fiscal impacts, and draft zoning to implement our agreed upon land use recommendations, and work to dovetail our work so that it's complementary of DCAM's legislative mandated efforts.
Peter, it was Dan and Patrick, I believe, not me.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying. Yep. So people comfortable with that as a recommendation? I'm open to wordsmithing. I don't really care about ownership on these type of things. I just want to move us forward here.
I think it captures it at a high level. You know,
All right.
I mean, I don't anticipate a whole lot of pushback from, I don't know, I guess I shouldn't say things like that, but I think there's going to be support for it.
Okay. You okay, Linda? I know you have an eagle eye for conciseness, and as I'm learning, so I'm open to any changes you want to make. Just you can tell us now, or just mark it up and get it back to me.
Yeah, well, I don't know if I have any specifics, I'll get them. I think it's really how broadly you define land use scenarios. Like, would that include issues about Route 2? So I just, just don't, are we going to ask this consultant to have transportation and be able to engage in that level of discussions, between state entities? So that I'm just kind of wondering, that jumped out at me as something we haven't really discussed.
Yeah, that's a great insightful piece of information. I know Dan has his hand up, but I'd just tell you that DOT moves with glacial swiftness. So next spring, they may be putting out their RFP for redesigning the rotary after our funds have been expended. So I think we need to sort of bear that in mind and make sure there's a subsection of the scope that says coordinate to the extent possible, or words along those lines, with DOT about the rotary and any road widening that might impact the redevelopment of the site. So Dan?
Well, I certainly want to concur with your observation about DOT. That said, DCAM assures us, to the degree that they can, that they will not be the holdup for our visioning process in terms of the discovery process, the collection of existing condition information that they're working on. And so I think that gives us some level of confidence, but it's an incredibly, and I actually, Linda, to your point, I specifically raised that concern because access kind of like that's where it all begins in some respects. And
Yeah.
so they nodded, they get it. So maybe it does. Maybe there's and I'm not a good wordsmith person either, but maybe there's some sort of because I reread Peter's last sentence, and maybe a couple more words in there that goes just beyond the legislated mandated efforts, that somehow all the work that they're doing will be, it will dovetail and be contemplated in that context. I don't know. Like I said, I'm not a wordsmith, but I don't think we're far from it. It's just it's a very important point that you raised.
Thank you for bringing that up, Linda.
Thanks.
We do have a really good team. All right, Elizabeth, did you get a chance to do some of the site constraint maps with GIS? Have they been able to generate any of that for us? Floodplain, wetlands? Not yet.
No, but so these maps you want to include in the RFP, or this is just
No, this is
Or-
for the committee. I mean, a lot of us have really basic questions about once you subtract out the wetlands and the floodplain and the wastewater treatment plant, how much is left? What are we
Okay.
really talking about? Once we get that basic information, and we can assume there's going to be a certain amount that's going to be subtracted out for transportation infrastructure inside the site. We need to be able to speak with some authority when we're talking to the public about, well, it's not really 51 acres, it's more like 40 or what, so
Yep.
that's the type of stuff we want to
Mm,
be able to talk about first as the land use committee, and then share it with the rest of our advisory board. So
I will follow up with them after this meeting, but let me to get actual figures. I'm sure everybody can, very familiar with the site now. And so this first line estimate, that's the 25-foot no disturb zone. This second line is the 50-foot no build zone. And we have the 100-foot wetland buffer. And you get into the 200-foot riverfront, which is out to here. And then I believe I believe this is, correct me if I'm wrong, this is, I can't remember which building is the wastewater treatment facility.
That's it.
So,
When you were just
yeah, this big one, right?
Mhm.
So that's already within the 200-foot riverfront. But so the back of the envelope calculation. And our team will do a much better job than this, but So you are at roughly 4.
About 10 acres.
Yep. Divided by
That makes sense.
Yeah,
about 10 acres.
Sorry, that's 10 acres off the 60?
After
Yep, and then
50.
you have- Yeah, and then you have this little area.
10 acres
here.
off the 31, or, so,
And so
Okay.
that's another 2. Yeah, so I'm gonna guess by the time you get certain mapping done, conservatively, yeah, you're probably looking at 11 acres.
and then the CHDC site, it's gonna have similar constraints, I think.
Yes, yep, they have some similar constraints. I can add that one up quickly if you want.
Yeah, that would be great.
While Elizabeth is mapping, has there been any, maybe this is a question for DCAM, but I think it would be a small area, but I have always felt that at least a portion of the other side of Commonwealth Avenue where the historic structure is should be added to the parcel. Even if it's just, one single family house lot depth of parcel, just so that parcel isn't isolated and there isn't, there's a parking lot there now, isn't, forever Route 2 buffer.
Yeah, and I think that's a legitimate request for us to make, to add the area there between the driveway that goes in back and the parking lot, or even the unused portion of the parking lot after the Route 2 widening down to the driveway that goes in. And
You're talking about down here?
No,
no, over on
yeah,
Ave.
this, yeah.
Oh, this
yeah.
parking lot?
Yeah,
Yes.
that parking lot, and then the driveway that enters it from the back. Yeah, right there. That should be added in. So again, I know the Route 2 widening is probably gonna want some of the parking lot. I don't have any problem with that.
So
I
that's
just think at least
about another
from
4
the
acres.
house back to the driveway there, we should at least, break off and develop that tomorrow.
Yeah.
So that's.
Yeah, I mean, it could even,
Approximately 4 acres.
yeah, I
Okay.
mean, we could even use the existing whatever edge of the wall there as a setback off of Route 2.
Yeah.
But you can clearly imagine the fabric that's currently on Commonwealth Avenue extending further down.
Yeah, we just have to, separate things out like the prison burial site and the
Yep.
like.
Yeah,
Uh,
of course.
But there is the
That's
opportunity
way
to
over
add
here.
something in, and that's appreciated. Scott?
Question, while we have this map up, I can't remember what Route 2 restructuring is going to envision for in front of the historic house. Is there going to be like an access road that's going to allow entry to our site? Is that what's going to happen? Will be a sort of a parallel road as the access points to our site versus coming off of Commonwealth? Is that the plan?
I
So
don't
there
believe is a
already
plan.
is an access road that goes on to Route 2. You can sort of see it over on the right-hand side there where the cursor is now.
That's the plan for the site?
Well, that's TBD, that, and we really need something to go out on the Com Ave
Yeah.
as well.
Dating back many, many moons ago, maybe almost 20 years ago now, when I was on the original Route 2 Advisory Committee, there were so many different schemes, Scott, they were considering, including carriage roads and flyovers and everything. So I have seen a VHB more recent study, but I'd have to go back and look at it, that was before they knew that this was going to get decommissioned.
So I guess my question is, it's a really good question Linda brought up. It's like, how do you engage a visionary planner when this is so up in the air?
Well, you sort of say, we want access on the ComEv. We want, multiple means of access to the site, and we don't want any of them to cause a traffic concern where they intersect with existing roadways.
Yeah, I think also, to Peter, building on Peter's point, we know a couple of things, Scott. We know we're not coming in from the river. And we know, so therefore we've got 3 other sides. And I think a good planner would look at that and say, what does that mean to come in from these different sides? And what does it mean to our site layout?
Thank you.
Yeah, the other thing I want to just point out that, well, Elizabeth was noodling on that, which is awesome. Thank you very much, Elizabeth. But I just quickly follow the cursor along the river. We've got 1,500 feet of frontage along the Aspet River.
What can you
That's-
do?
that's-
What can you do with the frontage?
Belt Riverfront real estate.
Probably not that, but certainly a linear park or things
You
like
have a
that. I
park-
mean,
Can you have a park and docks or boat launches and stuff?
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk about that, and that was one of the things that was requested. There is, having walked the site, there is a bank issue. It's fairly steep on the prison side along parts of it, but you could build a boat ramp that would probably have to be seasonal to some extent, lifted out maybe during the winter, but it's all possible.
I'm sorry, I have to drop off. Could someone else continue the meeting minute supervision?
Yeah, thank you so much, Aaron. I think we're just wrapping up the site constraints and we'll be going to public comment next. So
Appreciate it. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
thank you.
thanks, Aaron.
All right. So thank you, Elizabeth, for, giving us a quick look at the site. And if the town's GIS team can sort of map that out for us and give us more accurate numbers, that would be much appreciated. Anybody have any other sort of discussions? I mean, we raised the really important one of access to the site and how that's going to impact the redevelopment process. We've looked at some of the natural constraints in a very brief way. Anything else we want to just toss out at this point?
Peter, one quick question about the RFP. Again, I'm not sure if I heard it correctly. Who puts it together? Who drafts it? Is it Concord or our committee? And who sends it out and who schedules everything? Maybe I didn't get that answer.
That's going to be discussed with Megan. And I think unless Peter feels differently, my best guess is that we will not be in a drafting mode, but more in an editing and reviewing mode. And so we will have to lean on town staff, and I don't want to take a guess at who that might involve, but that's how I think it's going to happen.
Okay. So Linda.
Just a quick question. One thing that surprised me in the DCAM document was the comment on the ULI tap. And I just wanted to clarify that. Has that been determined? Okay. Thank you.
Still
I
up in
think
the air.
and I think it was a timing thing. I think it was added to the original one when there was some discussion around it, and so from my understanding is we haven't made a decision on that yet.
And is that something that this committee should make as a recommendation, or is that going to be decided at the advisory board level? I'm a little bit confused. Should we make a recommendation to the advisory board, or how is that going to be, because it's there, it keeps coming up, and I'm not sure how much input we should have, or is that just a general committee discussion?
I would like to believe, I haven't discussed this with Peter and a little, and have a little bit with Patrick, I think, but I would like to believe that we would make a recommendation to the full advisory board. And
Thanks.
since it has sort of elements of community engagement, at least in concept, and maybe even some zoning eventually, you know, I think everyone might want, each subcommittee might want to weigh in on it, but I think it emanates from this committee.
Well,
Thanks.
I wouldn't feel comfortable making a recommendation without Emily having a chance to participate. So let's put that on our agenda for our next subcommittee meeting.
I wasn't suggesting that we discuss it. I just wanted to clarify, given that we were talking about the DCAM document, what
Yeah.
had happened. So that's all. Thank you. Yeah, we could.
Thank you.
vote
And
with
maybe
each other.
sort of leaving the DCAM language in the combined zoning envisioning scope for the time being until we clarify that. Might allow some flexibility as we work this through. So it doesn't become a roadblock later. All right. Any other questions? Otherwise, I'll go to public comment. All right, it's open to public comment. Anyone have anything they would care to share? All right, well, thank subcommittee members for a very excellent meeting. I think we got a lot done, and we'll see you all Monday, hopefully in person or over Zoom. And have a great rest of Columbus Indigenous People Days week.